Hey, what's up, Street Talks? It's Eric from the Eric from Street Photography blog. So, a fun little review I wanted to do is reviewing the new Fujifilm XF10. Huge thanks to my buddy Aaron Fester for hooking it up. Of course, rocking the beautiful Aircam wrist strap Mark II. And wanted to just give you an overview of the camera I've been shooting with the last few days, and long story short, I actually really like the camera quite a lot, so let's just begin. So the question a lot of people have been asking is, what's the difference between the XF10 and the X70? Essentially, it's a continuation. Things which Fujifilm has done, which I actually really like. As you can see in the front element, there's no more selection for the aperture ring, which is actually very good because it makes the camera super slim. And if you're just curious for comparison, here is my best friend, the Ricoh GR II. If you compare both cameras, they are pretty much the same thickness. And honestly, at this point, both cameras are just so good that both cameras are actually a good option. And the reason I'm shooting more with XF2 is my Ricoh is actually broken. So see, I turn it on, you can't see anything until you take a picture, click, and then boom, it wakes up. So a little bit annoying if you want to capture decisive moments. But anyways, taking it back to the XF10, just in terms of the camera itself, it's actually really comfortable to hold. You can see this little grip here and the thumb grip here. So when you're actually on the streets shooting with it, holding it and carrying it is actually very comfortable. It feels very balanced. And I saw pictures of the XF10 on the internet, and I thought that it actually feels super cheap and plasticky. But in terms of the feel of the camera, it actually feels quite premium. It feels like a strong like magnesium something. I'm just making up nonsense. And the design is actually pretty good in terms of the knobs here. These rotate, and here's the shutter button here. It feels very good. My only downside of this camera is probably this little joystick here. It feels like a little bit cheap. It's not as clicky as I'd like it to be. Anyways, this small. To turn on the camera, press on and off. And you can see the difference between this camera and, let's say, the Ricoh is when you turn on the Ricoh. There's a fucking mosquito in this garage somewhere. Anyways, so you turn on the Ricoh, you can see the lens expands. Whereas with the XF10, turn on, turn off, maybe it just opens up a little bit, which is kind of nice. And currently the way I have the camera mapped is this little thing here is the exposure compensation dial. So you can see, let's say I'm photographing this thing here, you could see I'll scroll left to do darken for minus exposure compensation, and if I keep clicking it the other way, it makes everything brighter. Generally speaking, I've been shooting a lot of black and white on the XF10, which is surprisingly good. I'll just usually keep the exposure compensation around like -1, -0.7 seems to work pretty well. And once again, let's just take it back to the menu system. So just press this little menu button here. And for those of you guys who have the XF10, I'll just show you guys some of the menu settings that I've personally been doing. I just keep this on auto. I've been shooting raw. And all these settings are pretty much basic. And one things I did, which I like, is I turned off the touchscreen because I think that's actually a little bit annoying. And going into the menu here, so things which I've done is turn off the touchscreen settings. Also for power management, I turn on the auto power off 5 minutes so the camera doesn't go to sleep. I have no idea what high performance is, but I think that's probably better, so I turn that on. And if you just keep going down, oops, don't want to format the card obviously. This is actually one thing that I think is very important, is the screen setup setting. So when you go into screen setup, there's all these little settings, and generally the problem is people have this set up, which I consider not as good. So generally speaking, with the image display, that means after you take a picture, you don't want to be able to chimp. So turn this off so you don't get distracted when you're shooting. Framing guideline, I like to just put on this default grid 9, which is just rule of thirds. Just makes framing a little bit easier. And this is really important, display custom setting. So here, the only thing I enabled was framing guidelines, because by default, all of this silly nonsense here is enabled. And the way to enable it or disable it is just push this button downwards. It's pretty intuitive. And I unchecked everything except this thing which I like, exposure compensation digit, which means when I'm shooting, I could see if I'm -1 exposure compensation or I'm at 0. So all this nonsense, I turned it off. Because when you're shooting, you wanted to just keep it super clean. I just turned on the framing guideline. So essentially, these are the basic settings that I personally use. Another thing that I changed, so let's go back to the menu. So if you look in the back of the camera, there's that Q button and there's this function button. And I've mapped this function button here to access the flash. And the way you could do that is go through the menus and go right. I think it's under button setting. Let's see, is it this? Yeah, function setting. Let's see, is it this? Yeah, so when you go to here, you could see all the different programmable buttons. Also on the Fuji, there's this new function button up here. It's a little bit hidden. I never use it, but I think I currently have it mapped to ISO. And let's see, going down. So you can see function 2 is that thing in the top right corner. I have this changing to flash mode. So whenever I click that, I could change the flash setting. So for example, click that button here. And by default, I think the flash mode is off. But if I want to turn on the flash, and this is a little bit annoying, I have to click this button in the top right corner and then scroll through, and then turn on the flash. So just even as a fun assignment, I've just been shooting everything with a flash just for fun. If you want to review your pictures, put this little button here, and then you could see the pictures that you shot with the flash. In terms of the camera itself, once again, it feels very comfortable in the hand, and it's only $500, so it's actually a really good value. I personally really like it. I'm actually surprised that the black and white mode is really, really good in this camera. Also, I've just been shooting RAW and just processing it with Lightroom, AirCam presets afterwards. And yeah, it's a super strong camera. The flash works well. The autofocus, I upgraded the firmware, thanks for the comments, guys. And the autofocus seems fast enough. It's obviously not the most accurate or the fastest autofocus, but fast enough. And this is another tip too, is if you want to change autofocus settings, push this button, this joystick inwards, and then you could change the autofocusing points and then use this little knob here on the top to change how big you want. So whether you want it the wide mode, the zone mode, and I've experimented with everything. I found that if you do the smallest center point, single point here, the autofocus seems to be the fastest. And I haven't figured out all the settings yet, but I'm still just kind of experimenting with it. And above all, I think it's just probably the best, one of the best bang for the buck cameras out there in the market. I'm still shooting with it, testing it out. In terms of the question is like, should I get this or should I get the Ricoh GR version 2 or wait for the GR III to come out? Honestly, I'll probably get the GR III just to test it out and figure out what it is. But the downside of the GR III, it's not going to have this beloved flash button here, which is actually what I think makes the the GR II one of the best cameras. The fact that you could actually do that to enable the flash, Whereas with this stupid freaking XF10, every time I want to use the flash, gotta push this function button, click down, 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 down to turn off the flash. It's freaking annoying as hell. Anyways, so what I've just been doing for fun is when I'm not shooting street photography, I just keep on the flash for everything. So went to the mall the other day and shot some street photography with the flash. So yeah, so I mean honestly at this point, this is my practical suggestions with the whole XF10 versus Ricoh GR II. Ultimately, I still think the GR2 is the better camera. So if you have the option, if you don't have a point and shoot camera and you have the option of choosing the XF10 or the Ricoh GR version 2, just get a Ricoh GR version 2. And when the GR3 comes out, I'll probably review it. But I think the reasons to get the XF10 is if you prefer the Fujifilm system or if you want something new or whatever. If you already have the GR2, I don't actually recommend getting the XF10. And yeah, I think it's a super solid camera. Yeah, honestly, both cameras are really, really good, but if I could just give you my personal take, if you have the option to XF10, just get the Ricoh GR II. I still think it's more comfortable. The ergonomics are better. It kind of makes more sense, like when you're all the different buttons, exposure compensation. It's a lot faster. You could access the flash better. I think honestly, the GR2 is still the champion. Yeah, so this is just my practical opinions. For you guys who are shooting with the XF10, yeah, super solid camera. I've been shooting also a little bit with the classic chrome settings on the XF10. Yeah, also look pretty good. But hopefully I'll just kind of keep playing with the raw files on the XF10 and give you guys some thoughts and feedback and stuff like that. Right? So, thanks so much for watching, guys. Always think that, let's see, how can I get this to focus? I have no idea how to use my own camera. Okay, anyways. So ultimately, whatever camera you're shooting with doesn't really matter, but point and shoot's the way to go. Keep things kind of simple, have fun, and Ricoh Mafia for life.